Okay, we should be live. All right, hi, hey, hello there. Hey, folks. This is the PS Power Hour. We're going to do a bunch of PowerShell community lightning talks. I'm not going to take up too much of the time. Presumably, you're here because you know you want to listen to the content. So I'll just introduce our first speaker today, Jakob. Jakob, take it away.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jakub. I'm owner of the Pester Framework, and you can find me on Twitter right here. Today, I will be talking about a module that's called Assert. That's a module that I write. And so, what is Assert? Assert is a module that is a collection of assertions for Pester, and it's highly inspired by Fluent Assertions, which is an awesome .NET library written by Dennis Duman. And I use this library on every C# project, and I greatly miss it when I write pester tests. So the Fluent Assertion library is right here. You can look it up if you write C# code and C# tests. It's really great. So why even use assert? So the biggest reason is object equivalency that assert provides. This is the reason I started this project, and this is the reason I love using it in my tests. This means that you can take two objects, you can provide them to assert equivalent, and it will compare them recursively. And it will tell you that they are different, and not only it will tell you that they are different, it will tell you how they are different. So let's see an example. So here I will just run a quick setup. It imports everything that I need. It imports pester and assert version 0.95, and it also imports this test function that you will be seeing that just prints passed if the test passes, and it prints red error message if the test doesn't pass. So it allows me to show you multiple assertion fails in one go. So here in the first demo, we have two objects, the expected object and the actual, and all the demos will have very similar structure. And I provide the actual object to assert equivalent and the expected object also as well. And if I run this, I get a message from assert equivalent that says expected property name should have value Thomas, but instead it was Jakub. The whole repository of assert is polluted with examples that use my name and my age, so I figured I will just do the same in these demos. And it also tells us that there is property age that is on this actual object, but not on the expected. So obviously those objects are not equivalent. So what do I mean when I say equivalent? So in PowerShell, we distinguish between two types of objects. One of them are value types. So for example, 1000 is a value, and no matter where we get this other 1000, if we compare them, they will be equal because they are the same value. On the other hand, the reference objects, like this PS custom object, are compared by references. So even though they look the same on both sides, and if we highlight them, we can see they are the same text. If we compare them, they will report false because they are not the same instance of the object. If we had an operator like this that would be called equivalent, it would go through this object and it would look at name and compare it to the name on the other side, and it would report that they are equivalent because they have the same shape and the properties have the same values. And this is what assert does internally. So how is this useful? So in our tests, we usually work with more than just values. We work with whole objects. So assuming we have an object that's quite simple, it again has name, age, and it has languages. And notice that those languages are in different order. If we want to compare them with just using should, then we need to write 3 lines of code. And then on the third line, we realize, okay, should just doesn't order the items, it cares about the order, so it fails. So we sort them ourselves on both sides to make it safe. Or we just write 1 line of code and we get a report that everything passed. So here we did 3 lines of code, here we did just 1. But that's not the only difference. So if there is one problem with the previous code that's not very obvious, and that's there is only the first failure reported from should. So if I return to my previous self, where I was 23, I only knew PowerShell, then and compare it to my current self, where I knew PowerShell and C#, then what I get from should is that the age is different, which is only the first difference in those objects because name is the same and age is different. But if I look at the output from assert, I get both differences. So if I run this on a build server, I get the full information about the differences between the two objects, which is much better because then if I would be fixing this with just should, then I might fail again on languages and so on, and it would take a lot of time, so I don't get just partial information. And if we wanted to express this with just should, we could do it this way. So we would have different its and we would put the different properties in different items. But this also has a problem. But I will run it just to show you that there are two items that fail. So it's kind of the same, but it's very verbose. But the different problem is that if there are more properties on expected or more properties on actual, then we don't get any report. So running this code, the should will still pass. And that's not correct because now we have this, we have this drinks coffee property on the expected that we forgot to add here. And we have this has small keyboard property on the actual side that we also didn't compare. But assert equivalent just goes through the whole objects and compares all items. And so we get this report that correctly shows both properties that were changed on the objects. And this makes our test more maintainable and much, much easier to trust because we don't have to parse this. We don't have to compare all the 20 different shoulds that we have there. We just look at this simple object and just know that this is what we are comparing to. So this previous demo is awesome if you do like unit testing, if you control both the expected and the actual side, and you control the shapes of the object. But sometimes, for example, if you do integration testing, the actual object is coming from some commandlet. It's strongly typed. You cannot just remove properties from it, and you don't care about all the properties. So that's why we have exclusions. So in this case, I have this expected object and this actual object where I have paradigm on the languages, which is here missing. And I also have those two more properties that I also don't care about. So what I can do is that I add exclusions. So first I will just run it. So here in 3 places, the object is different. So this is one place, next, and the next. And in the second one, it passes because we excluded the path. We can do that in 3 ways. One of them is by using the full path to the property. So in this case, it's just the name of the property. The second one is by using like wildcards. So everything that ends with keyboard will be excluded from the comparison. And the third one is the most cool one where we can use dot to like dot navigate through the object like we would in PowerShell. So even though languages contain an array, we can just say every paradigm on every object in this array will be ignored. So this is super useful for integration testing because then we have just this expected object. We just tell to compare to this one, but we can still detect changes. So if I go here and I add another property like ABC is 10, I run it, I get a report that there is some difference that the ABC is missing from the other object, and I get the options that I use to compare it, so I know what I was excluding.
About 2-minute warning?
Yep. And in my last demo, we do pretty much the same thing, but sometimes it would be very time consuming to list all the properties that we want to exclude. And we actually only care about like 2 or 3 properties from the object. For example, we query the sim class of operating system. So we want to know what operating system we are, but we don't care about all the other counters there are on the object. So what we can do is that we specify the expected object and we specify an option that says only compare to what's on the expected object. So if we run this, then we again get passed, we get the same result. Those are seemingly same, but in here, if we add more properties on the actual, then we don't care about them at all, so it still passes. Okay, so that was all my demos. So to sum up, assert is awesome to use, awesome to write tests with, same as fluent assertion is. It supports every version of PowerShell, including PowerShell 2 and PowerShell Core, just like Pester. You can find it on PowerShell Gallery. You can join me in development in my GitHub repo, and you can follow me on Twitter. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Next up, Chris.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly cover Git Rebase. It's an interesting and powerful tool for changing your history. Changes the starting point of a branch, rebases it. You can use it interactively to reorder and change your commits, and you can take all of the commits in one branch and replay them on top of another. So why we use it? It'll keep your history nice and linear. You can get rid of useless commits like fixing a typo and missing that semicolon off, and you can bring features from master without horrible merge commits showing up everywhere. So there are 3 main ways to use it, but we'll cover that after a brief warning. So don't use this on a branch that other people are working on. It rewrites history. It will cause problems for everyone involved. But there are very rare occasions where you may have to use it, and you will need to do a force push to update the remote repository. So please use force with lease, because then it won't overwrite other people's changes if they have accidentally done stuff on your branch. So git pull -- rebase is useful for pulling in changes from a parent branch, such as master, without merge commits, and it keeps your history nice and straight and linear. Nice and quick and easy way to use it. And basically the primary way I use it these days. Then you've got rebase -I, which is interactive rebasing and useful for squashing commits together, changing the order commits happened in, changing commit messages, and a whole bunch of really useful things in that. You can specify how many commits you want to go back. You can specify a branch using just the same way with git rebase -I head ~5 or origin master or wherever you want to go. And then git rebase is the basic command, which just tell it which branch to start replaying its changes on, and it will do so. The important thing to note about git rebase itself is that if you're specifying a remote branch, you have to use origin /master, all one word, unlike other git commands where it's spaces instead of a slash. Oh, merge conflicts do happen still, but the way you resolve them is the same way as normal, but you add the changes or stage them, and then don't commit the changes. You just do git rebase -- continue, as I will show you in a minute. If something goes wrong or it screws up horribly, you can do git rebase -- abort or git reset -- hard origin_head to go back to where it was before. You can also use that second option for going back if you screw up a merge as well, which is quite useful. And some helpful links to the git rebase documentation and the git flight rules, which are really cool for anything git related. So let's have a look at that. A quick example. So this is a nice simple repository. We've got our master branch, and it's advanced a bit since our feature branch started.
Hey, I'm so sorry. This is Chrissy, and I can see Jakob's screen entirely, and probably so can everyone else, I would assume.
Interesting. I definitely hit share.
I don't know if Michael is sharing someone else's Jakob's screen.
Nope, I show Chris's right now.
Oh,
Okay.
That's what's showing
if
on
you're
the.
not on YouTube itself, sometimes the Google Hangouts client will show a different screen.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry about
Okay,
that.
I was just
Sorry.
so sorry to interrupt. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, so this is how the repository looks at the moment. Master is ahead of our feature branch we've started working on. So we want to bring that feature branch up to date with master and merge it in. So we do check out feature branch, and then we can just do git pull rebase master or origin space master. Or it would work if I was sensible. So it says it's going off to get my version of master and update it. So if I refresh this now, we can now see that our feature branch is coming straight off where master was. So now I can do everything. It's a nice, straightforward, fast-forward merge, which keeps our history nice and clean. So then let's have a look at our next option if we have an interactive rebase. So we do is this drops us into Vim or your other editor of choice, whatever you've set it up to. And in this case, we've got mistakes in our history. So we've fixed a typo. We don't really want to see that, and we've added some new features. So if I have a look at those commits on the branch itself, wherever I put it. So I'm fixing a typo, and which should really be part of this earlier commit. Let's rearrange these commits a little and hush. And then just the commit ID. Comment this line out. And then commit that. And now this is going to be what our history looks like. So I don't particularly want fixed typo appearing in any of my messages. So remove that. And now, with my history on here, I can see I have my new feature, and my original commit has the fixed content in, and no fixed typo messages, no semicolon fixed here. I get everything nice and simply down to just the messages I need, just the commit contents that I care about. And if we have a quick look at merge conflict. So if I do this master, that didn't do what I wanted. Set that, and I'll do if you merge it, if you try to rebase off the correct branch. Is I've got a merge conflict. I need to sort this out. So this is the file. Which ones do I want? Let's make things nice and simple. Just accept both the changes. I save it. I don't make any other changes. I don't commit it, and then add the file I've changed, and then git rebase continue. Do my rebase, and my feature branch then gets up to date with all of the commits that have happened on master, and I can see exactly where I am, and I don't have merge commits or any of that nonsense. So that's a very quick overview of git rebase and how to use it. I'd say make sure if you do start using this approach, be a little careful at first, but you can always go back to how things were before, and it's a very powerful tool for rewriting your history and tidying up your repository and keeping it usable by other people and yourself. So yeah, that's me done.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. Coming up next, Phil Bossman.
All right. So name's Phil Bossman. So we're going to talk about, it's kind of basic kind of stuff. We're going to actually just talk about how using the idea that, you're given a vendor's tool, and basically if you're also given PowerShell, there's a lot of power involved. That's the power. So so one of the things, I'm a Citrix admin, and Citrix provides a migration tool for XenApp, which is an old environment 6.5. And so the beauty is, hey, we're going to do it. And when the first time I launched it, it didn't work just right. But then I'm like, hey, it's a bunch of PowerShell scripts. I can do stuff with this. So then I ripped it open and put it together and going, all right, so it works, but it's still not working. Well, why is it not working? Because they wrote it for 7.6, but we're working on 7.15. And so if actually you launch it for the first time, you get a whole bunch of red messages. And like, why does this not work? So we came into it and said, well, if it's working, why is it not working? So read the red text, and all we figured out, well, hey, this is what they wrote, and they're trying to reference reading the text and what's the messages. Hey, they're trying to load a provider that doesn't exist anymore. So when they upgraded from version 12 to version 13, they created a new version, a new binary. So I had to just change this out. And so with a simple rewrite of uncommenting code and doing that, it actually resolved my issue as far as one thing. So the beauty is that, hey, if the vendor gives you a set of PowerShell scripts to actually do a task, hey, you can just as easily come in here and modify their code, especially if it's not a compiled binary. So that was the first thing that happened. So I started using this, and it was working fine. So like any good person, we test in our non-prod environment, and it's working. And then I get a phone call going, why is somebody using an app that shouldn't be using it? Well, lo and behold, inside their binary as well, where we're importing somebody's farm, hey, well, they decided to add domain users to whatever app I decided to install. Like, what? All right, well, let's come in here, figure out why is it doing it. And so I had to just come in here and just uncomment all the domain admin. Like, why would it add domain users there? Well, so somebody wrote their code, and that's what it is. So effectively here, it again took their module, said for some reason they're adding domain users to a delivery group. Now, if you're a Citrix administrator, you know what a delivery group is, but that doesn't matter at that point. So that's really what happens at this point. So let's go take a step back and go on what am I trying to do and what I'm trying to resolve. So what happens in a Citrix environment, this module basically, it's designed to simply export an entire Citrix farm. So dump the entire Citrix farm into an XML. That's what it's supposed to be doing. And then you send it to the new environment and then just take that XML. So you then copy it over to the other machine. You copy to the other machine, and then you can then use it from the new machine and then import all this stuff. So basically use that XML and import the entire farm. But again, what the heck am I importing an entire farm and putting it into an individual group? Like, this is PowerShell. I can do what I want with this. So I wrote this little import app kind of thing where, again, I use that same import module. I take what I got from the, actually, here's my exported farm. But then, like, I didn't want all of it. I just want the parts I wanted. So I just threw the whole thing into an XML, then got out the parts I wanted. So I created an XML, did some filtering to actually just remove everything but the part I wanted. And then we finally clone it, write it to an XML to a new XML, which is effectively a subset of the first one. And then I can import the whole thing. And so one of the other things I added in this fashion is that, can I just do some wildcards in here? And so if we run it, hey, you know what? We can, whatever's in there, we can say, I want to give me just these two and such. I'm not going to run it because it's live, but it will go. And so if we uncheck these, we'll just cancel. It won't go. And it would have tried to do it, and there's nothing there. So we're not doing any of that stuff. So the idea that, hey, just because the vendor gave you a tool, you can look into it and modify it at that point. So back to my slide. So that's that. So, oh, sorry, let's see some PowerShell. So second problem. So also, Citrix also provides a, using PBS, a happy wizard that says, hey, let's do some work. But they also offer PowerShell behind it. So quick little view here. We're using PowerShell, PBS. So you click the next one. Okay, give me my credentials, connects to my vCenter. All right, so this process here takes like 3 or 4 minutes just to go and enumerates my entire vCenter environment. Well, I don't want an environment. I just want 1 or 2. And then, okay, once I get that, then I have to get all the templates that I want to deploy VM from. Once I get that, give me the vdisk, and then give me the collection, and then, oh, here's finally where I can say, hey, I want to deploy 11 machines with these specs, and I'm going to put it in this OU, but also, and then I can use this naming structure to give me a machine. All right, now finally, good. Now we're good to go. But what if you don't want to do that all the time? Well, that's where PowerShell can again jump in and help you. So I use this and actually created a template that basically says, hey, give me the whole thing. So I wrote a quick little script. So I used, I already know all the parts that I want to have. So give me the collection, give me the store, give me the device type. So in PVS, there's multiple different devices: production, test, maintenance machines. And then here, I want to pre-populate some of this. Because I've actually put it into parameters, I can pass it all at the command line. I can run it as a script. So in bulk, I can now create my machines as I want them and as I see fit to create them as in a bulk environment. And one of the other things is, so one of the things it's doing here is actually creating my machine name based upon what I'm creating. So if I'm giving a production machine, I define what my server number is going to be. So I can say, kind of like just like the picture was, I can do an index number. But one of the main reasons why I wrote this is to say, well, I don't want a number. I just want to tag a machine with some, not an index number. I just want there'll only be one of these. There'll only be one of these. So the whole wizard didn't even give me the ability to do that at all. And so every time I wanted to spin up a new machine, I had to go through the wizard that took 5 minutes just to get 3 machines. Or I can just run this once and add a command line, and it will deploy my machines for me. One of the other things is, so I can come and just automatically, I can pre-populate all my parts. So there's my template. These are the templates I already looked for. There's the vCenter I'm looking for. Here's my cluster, where we're going, what data stores. So effectively, all this is really doing is, hey, on the fly, building my machines. So I'm creating a collection of names here. So for all the names I want, I build a new VM in vCenter, and then it sits here and waiting for all those VMs to be created. Then I get the machines that I just created, change the CPU and memory for all those machines. I then grab all the machines that I just dated. I get the MAC address so that in vCenter I can then assign them to PVS. And then once that, and then add them to the collection that I already have, and then we're done. So really, the whole point of this is that just because a vendor gives you some random GUI, if they also give you PowerShell, they can give you the tools to make that GUI do whatever the heck you want it to do. And quite often, you can have it do more than you want. And that's my spiel. My name is Phil Bossman. I'm a senior Citrix admin. Been using PowerShell for a long time. I also run the Power Research Triangle user group. You can find me on, I'm Shalog on Twitter. I'm Shalog, and I do blog, but no, that's really a big question mark. I don't do it very much. But thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for your time, Phil. Yep. Coming up next, but not least, Chrissy Lemaire is going to close out the year the way that she opened it, strong.
Damn, thank you, man. Oh, ooh, let's see. Look, not so strong, already on the wrong slide. All right, so welcome everyone to 7 reasons to build a workplace module. This is the least prepared I have ever been for a presentation. I thought that it was at 1 a.m. my time, and it turns out it's about 7 p.m. And I like to obsessively practice. I've only gotten 3 in for this 5-minute presentation, so I'm about 87 practices behind. Oh, look. All right, so a little bit about me. I am at CL on Twitter. I am also a PowerShell and SQL Server MVP, and I just got my master's in systems engineering, which has kept me really busy lately. I'm super pumped about that. And also, my day job, I'm a systems engineer with GDIT at NATO Special Ops Headquarters in Belgium. So on today's agenda, look, I'm just an admin standing in front of a world asking other admins to convert their directory of scripts into a PowerShell module. And when I'll just go back a bit. When I first submitted this, I was super pumped about this idea because I had a new coworker that I had met at PSConf.eu, and he came in, and I was so excited because I was like, hey, I have this module that not a lot of people know about because not a lot of administrators are using PowerShell. But he was super into PowerShell. He was so excited about it. He's like, oh my God, that's such a great idea. I could just share my scripts that are in, are in my profile or that I was working on with you and with the rest of the administrators. But since then, I got really busy, so my apologies. So the definition of a module is it's a set of related PowerShell functionalities grouped together as a convenient unit, usually in a saved directory. And this is probably something that you're familiar with. And by defining a set of related script files, assemblies, and related resources as a module, you can actually reference, load, persist, and share your code way easier than you would otherwise. So a lot of us, what we'll do is we'll have, whenever I first made DBA tools, which is now the SQL Server Community's community module, it started out as just a directory. And I think that because I came from a Linux background, I was like, why in the world would I import a module to run a command? I'm just going to skip right to running commands. But it turns out that there's a whole lot of awesome benefits, and I would never go back. Now I never actually write scripts. I go straight to modules. A lot of people also put it in their modules, so you could see, their profile. So you could see here that this is a function that's automatically loaded every single time that you load PowerShell, unless you specify no profile. So what are the benefits? The first thing is that sharing is caring. And if you have a corporate repository, it makes it way easier. I had a buddy named Andy, and Andy loved PowerShell. Whenever I first got to my workplace, hey, thanks. I was like, hey, I love PowerShell. Does anyone else? And Andy stood up and he was like, man, you should check out my profile. I have a ton of functions. And then I was like, well, let me see what you're doing. And then I showed him what I was doing. And it was a really awesome experience. And it brought me closer to my coworker. And it made us both more productive. And then what we did was ultimately we used GPOs to set up a corporate repository. And Kevin Marquette talks a lot about this, that made it a lot easier for us to share. Another thing is that whenever you are, and granted you can do this with your directory, but if you're keeping all of your functions in your profile, then you can't really keep it in source control. And so that is another benefit to changing from keeping your scripts as scripts to an actual module. Another thing that you could do is include other library files in like /bin. So just recently, we released 2 masking commands, data masking, and we actually used, I'm so sorry, I said like actually 500 times. We used a DLL from the community. There's a really awesome community project called Bogus, and it's a C# project that ultimately ends up in this bogus.dll, and we throw that into our bin, and then we can easily access that and share it with everyone that's using DBA tools. And just like DBA tools, if you're doing this within your corporate module, then you can share that as well. You can also auto-include other modules. So anytime that I start a module, I generally load Pester because I'm going to be testing it. And I load PS Framework. And so whenever you are using that, instead of using your scripts, your directory of scripts, and granted, you can include these. It just makes it so much easier when you're using a module. Another reason is module scope variables. So the last time that I talked at PSPowerHour, I talked about PS default parameters. And that's actually something that we use within DBA checks. We set every single command within our module to enable exception. And this allowed our commands to throw, which allowed Pester to catch those and report them as failures. So module scope variables are super awesome. Another reason is if you have a prerequisite, like let's say that you have a minimum Windows PowerShell version, or minimum common language runtime, or even like the required modules. It just makes it so much easier if you have it in a module manifest. And finally, this is something that really prompted me to, in addition to making it easier, and I was just honestly making it easier for myself, what I wanted to do was say, hey, I work for this very large organization, and I made the PowerShell module for the entire organization. So I put that on my resume, which ultimately ends up in dollars, francs, euros, or yens, hopefully. So this could be you. Let's say that you work for Acme. You could just import module Acme and then get command module Acme. And this is just 2, but it could be like our organization, about 150. And that includes things like, let's say, something very common is, let's see all the deactivated users, or the users who haven't been active in the past 150 days. That's one thing that you can include. So it's just stuff that you would usually include in your profile can now be way more easily accessible. And here's a bonus. I wanted to highlight this. If you're an SME, if you're an expert in your field, if possible, create add-ons as a community module. And add it on to your favorite module. So, even if SQL PS had lived up to its ideal, I would have loved it to build something like SQL PSX, right? And it doesn't have to just be SQL Server. If you're a System Center person and you're into that, there must be something that that Microsoft probably isn't providing that you can do. If you want to, if they're not doing syncing just right, what you can do is you can start your own community module, and then you can reach out to people like Fox Deploy and say, hey, do you want to join in this module? Hopefully there's this big happy family that's making a community module that extends the Microsoft official module. So this is my sign off. Have a lot of fun, and consider, if you are starting a module, use PS Framework. It's something that there's a ton of people that are using it. It's by Frederick Weinman. He currently works for Microsoft as a security engineer. He's super brilliant when it comes to PowerShell. And PS Framework enables super easy logging and configuration and things like that. We use it in a lot of our modules, and I actually use it at work as well. And then also, if you're starting from scratch, you can use Plaster, but I found that a little bit hard. I like PS Module Development, which is also from Fred. Just made it a lot easier to get started. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Chrissy. This is my worst presentation ever. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chrissy.
Anytime.
So that is technically a wrap of all of the lightning talks that we had scheduled for today. So I want to encourage everybody who's listening, if you get a chance, go ahead and submit a talk for 2019. Feel free to reach out to any of these folks. We try to make this as low pressure as we possibly can. Chrissy's, I think, being a little bit self-deprecating there, is the least prepared she's ever been, and she nailed it. So you can do this.
I appreciate it.
So I'd like to encourage you to submit, and we kind of had a really, really last-minute idea here, which is that it might be interesting to sort of do a panel to close out 2019 with the people who are currently on the call, which is myself, Warren, Chrissy, Chris, Jakob, and Phil. So if that's interesting, we might stick around here and go for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, in which case drop some comments in the live chat about topics you'd like us to cover, questions you'd like us to answer. And now we'll have video of people, so they can turn their video back on instead of screen sharing if they want.
What up, man? You did good. I like that.
So I guess I had a question for Chris, which I think a lot of folks listening could probably sink their teeth into, is your experience onboarding to Git, right? So the first 30 days is just learning, okay, I've added a thing, and now I'm committing a thing, and I'm pushing a thing, and then as long as nothing goes horribly wrong, everything's okay. But then inevitably it does. So how did you get from that point to the point where you're at now, where you're like, oh yeah, I do patch commits and stuff, it's fine, look at this, look at me rebase? How'd you get there?
Lots of fire. and lots of trial by fire primarily. Yeah, it was contributing to open source was a big one for me. Getting involved, just stuck into the projects, doing stuff. We're going through a bit of a patch at the moment, converting a bunch of devs over from TFVC to Git. So no doubt we'll have a lot of similar questions from them. But it's just to get stuck in, and if you're going to screw something up, you can always go back. It doesn't take too much hassle to just git reset the last commit or whatever you need to do.
Jakob, I kind of get the feeling that you've had a similar sort of experience where you've gone far past where most of us kind of end up with Git. Did that come easily to you, or did it take you a while to kind of get to that point? I mean, you contribute to one of the largest open source projects that we have. So curious about that. You are muted currently, and I cannot unmute you.
I thought that it was unsynced.
Still muted.
Okay, got it.
Hangouts is super unfriendly.
Now?
There you go.
Woo!
Awesome. Yeah, so when I started with Pester, it was like how much, 5 years ago, something like that. I had no idea what Git is, and I always had to look up the commands and so on. And now I just work with it every day, you know, because I'm a developer now. So it takes time, but the basic commands is something that you can learn in a few days or in like a month at worst. Just go to the Git Pro, read like the first 100 pages and of the free book, and you will learn a lot, I think.
I do want to highlight for people who do love PowerShell and the command line, such as myself. Jeffrey Snover had actually said he had this presentation where he was doing a keynote, and it said like PowerShell or GUI for one server and PowerShell for a ton of servers. And I do think that I would like to reach out to people who are scared of Git. It's a hard concept, I think, to even get in general. And then whenever you add the command line, it kind of piles onto that. So if you explore GitHub Desktop, that makes it a lot easier and more approachable. And that's something that even though I'm 24/7 command line, I genuinely, and I even like Linux, I just don't want to learn Git. And I like their desktop. So if somebody is concerned about the approachability of Git, to explore GitHub Desktop, I think that it's awesome, and it's completely usable in very large projects.
Thanks. I'm going to pass along a question from Jess, which is to any and all the speakers. What's your favorite bit of PowerShell that you've written in 2018?
I cannot pinpoint anything, but it's really awesome to be back into Pester and having like 2-week vacation where I can just work on that.
Really good Christmas. The best present ever. Thank you, Santa. For me, I'm actually going to be presenting at PSConf EU about something that really embarrassed me. It was import CSV to SQL. And at first I was super pumped about it. And I saw myself just going crazy overboard whenever it came to user approachability. And what I've learned over the years is that it's not all about that. I mean, you really do have to consider other things. And so my rewrite of import DBA CSV, it was a rewrite of one of our most popular commands. Now it's way more reliable. Like I had actually stopped using import DBA to CSV, or sorry, CSV to SQL. Ever since I've rebuilt it, I'm just like, oh, thank God. It's something that if somebody were to file a bug report about, I wouldn't be embarrassed about anymore. It's just way more useful. It's not super hyper focused on speed. It's more about global reliability. And I think that that's something that's really important that I've looked over the past few years. So 2018 has really been more about reliability for me. And Pester has really played a huge part in that. I sleep better at night. Dude, I'm always like, thank you so much, Jakob. Every time that I see him at a conference, I'm like such a fanboy. Like, thank you so much. It really has changed my entire life. It's not only made DBA tools better, it made my work life better as well. And I know that Jakob usually uses it for unit testing, but I use it for integration tests where I interact with actual SQL servers. And yeah, it's been incredible. So I like reliability of 2018.
Phil, Chris, anything to weigh in on? Any interesting stuff? What's your favorite thing you did?
I don't think I've got anything that's my favorite thing I've written this year, but just attending the various user groups and conferences has been my favorite part. Just talking PowerShell with everyone else who really loves PowerShell is great.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same thing. As not so much, but really figuring out fundamentals, and really when I work with the local PowerShell user group, and just interacting with the user group, and if you're not involved with the user group, definitely need to get involved with the user group. And there are so many virtuals that come to ours, which are virtual online too. We're twice a month, but that's not a sales pitch either. But the idea that really interacting with other people and basically going back to fundamentals, solving other people's problems with the problems that you've already solved, or even just presenting your own problems and find out, hey, you did it this way and I did it that way. So I think one of the things that I think was exciting, or just an interesting thing that happened recently, so even our user group, we actually all sat around out one day after work talking about it and going, well, you solve code management this way, you solve code management that way. And we actually had a user group meeting, which was 3 independent people talking about managing their code and sharing code with everybody else in 3 separate ways. And so just that interaction has been, I think, the best part. And the proudest thing that is just giving back and being able to share just how I manage my code, but then also how somebody else manages their code to me. So that was the best part.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's one of the things that I felt like I was able to kind of get back to this year, was going back to some of the fundamentals. One of the things everybody who speaks at user groups, I think, has the same experience. I have yet to go to like a basics talk or a fundamentals talk and not learn something that I didn't already know. Like, I've never ever been through one where that hasn't been the case. And in a lot of, I think for the most part, focusing back on some of those fundamentals, because there's still so many people who haven't been like inundated with like all the advanced PowerShell that you can possibly write. Like, very few people statistically are contributing to open source on the daily. So when that's all we focus on in our talks, because that's the stuff that like we don't understand yet, so that's why we want to talk about it, is we want to dig into those pieces. When we focus on that, we leave this huge swath of people behind who are just like, yeah, I really want to be able to like drain an app pool. Can you help me? Like, how do I do that? And I feel like going back and helping those folks makes their lives and operations so much better, because it's so frustrating to try to do that for 36 different pools manually through the GUI. I mean, that's a terrible experience.
Yeah, and I think that some of the things is, even this year, is just to find the things that people are solving using their own methods. And I think in my presentation I talked is there was a whole thing where give me the list of apps and give me a whole thing, but then on top of it throw a GUI that displayed just a couple pieces. And I saw somebody do that. I'm like, holy mackerel, I can do that. And what is it? It's nothing more than out grid view. Out grid view. I can do that without grid view. This is great. And so I don't have to set up filters and where and do this all at the command line. I can just, in my script as it goes along, is throw a GUI and then keep on going. I can go back through the pipeline, send it all the way down the pipeline. So it's just a little piece, but you just learn it as it goes. So
were you using out grid view with T-object by chance?
I did both.
Is that what you're talking about specifically that got you really excited about out grid view?
Well, just the fact that I never realized that I can send out grid view and then just parse the pieces. I've always seen out grid view and just show me data, but then
totally
the same can pass through. So give me a list, give me a whole collection of stuff, and I don't really care. Then select the parts I want, and then pass it on. Because I've only used T object, so I did T object just to give me the variable. And then I realized even this year I was at Ignite and I saw Jeffrey Snover throwing out variable. I'm like, out variable.
I love out variable. I was actually going to present on that instead, because that's what I love to be obsessed with stuff. And right now I'm obsessed with out variable. And like, I think 3 months ago, whenever I was obsessed about talking about getting your scripts into modules, that's whenever I presented this one or suggested it. But yeah, man, out variable is super easy, especially because I think as we're troubleshooting and we're going through, I mean, for me, I'm kind of barbaric whenever I'm programming, and a lot of times what I'll just do is at the end do -out variable A, and then use A over and over instead of hitting home $A equals. And so yeah, out variable is something that's really interesting and useful.
Yeah, and it gives us some features to be, T object was my go-to before, but then I saw out variable, and then the idea recently just to out grid view is just a super interesting, and especially because as I'm trying to introduce PowerShell to others that they don't like they see the command line and they're like, get it, I don't want that. And so if I can introduce some going here, I'm going to give you some stuff. They'll import from here, and then here's this GUI thing. Oh look, I can click on these and then click OK, and then it goes. And so they feel a lot better that okay, it's doing some work.
Totally. I love out grid view too, because with SQL Server Pros, we have SQL Server Management Studio, and down at the bottom at the query analyzer and the output at the bottom, everybody always wants that to be filterable. And what's awesome about being a PowerShell advocate within the SQL community is I get to say, hey, you can actually do that using out grid view, and then I show them all the filters, and it's kind of what we've wanted for so long in SQL Server Management Studio.
Cool.
So I wanna pivot to something that was asked a little bit earlier in the chat, which is topic came up of people who are scared to contribute to open source, and I think just about everybody on this call is a contributor or has contributed to open source. Two of you are maintainers on huge projects, and then I think the rest of us have at least played around with it a little bit. So what is that experience like, and what would you kind of say around like people who are trying to get into open source contributions if they're trying to like kind of work up the courage or whatever? Would
you be able to say, because my screens are all messed up, would you be able to tell me exactly what they said so that I would know instead of the general idea?
Someone just mentioned they're afraid to commit to open source projects.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you.
Yep.
So for me, for example, I will try to look up my first commit to Pester, and I was very lucky to like go into that project when Scott was on there, Scott Mods. Then he invited me to the project, thanked me for my contribution, teach me how to do actual topic branch instead of just committing from master, and like show me the whole process of contributing into the project, because he saw that I'm interested and there is a potential contributor. So this is, I think, that a lot of the people will experience when they will try to commit into open source projects. Maybe choose a smaller open source project for the start where they actually value contributors, because they don't have like 8,000 issues open. So if you want to approach like a bug on VS Code, maybe, I'm not saying like I have no experience committing to VS Code, but chances are if you commit to a project where there is 10 pull requests per year, the person will have more time explain to you what you need to do. The process won't be that difficult. There won't be any checks to, confirm with executives within the company, any future plans for the project, and so on. You will have to talk with the one maintainer of the one project. So probably much easier if you just start with a smaller project. Just work out the courage, ask like, I have this idea of a feature in an issue. Tell them what you think. They will tell you if they will accept a pull request. You implement it, then you figure it out together how to merge it, and that's it. Now you are open source contributor.
And I think based on Jakob's feedback that are there, since DBA Tools and Pester are two of the largest projects, are there any projects within the within the PowerShell community that are too large to contribute to? And I think that the answer is no. I think that if you contribute to Pester and if you contribute to DBA Tools, both of them will have very welcoming communities. So are you aware of any that are too big? Like the thing that you had mentioned was VS Code, which is JavaScript. I remember I went to a repo that had like, I don't know what, something crazy, like 8,000 issues and hundreds of pull requests. And then I just kind of like It's like, man, I would never be able to manage something like that. But I haven't seen that within the PowerShell community. So I think that for that person who wants to contribute, that I think that every single PowerShell project out there is safe to contribute to.
Most likely. Like yesterday or 2 days ago, I published a list of help wanted issues on Pester, and a lot of them are marked like good first issue. Hopefully they will be easy to implement. So if you want to just be an open source contributor, go there, choose one. I will try to help you to get it into the code base.
And I know with DBA tools as well, we have a Slack community, and that's at sequelps.io/Slack. And we have DBA tools dev and the DBA tools channel. And I've seen people spend hours, our major contributors do spend hours walking people through the process of submitting a pull request, and will help through every step of the way. So our community as well is super helpful. And I know that Jakob is as well.
Yeah, and Warren had to go a little bit early, but Warren maintains several smaller scale open source stuff, and he is one of my favorite maintainers to work with, because every time you submit code to one of his repositories, he's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much!" Like, yeah, I would have done this, but like I didn't think to, or it didn't come up, or I didn't have time or whatever. And then he gives you a quick review, and the process is relatively painless. One thing that I would say is that there is definitely some well-earned fear around contributing to open source projects generally. I don't find those fears to be very well founded within the PowerShell community, though. And if you run into somebody whose response to your submission for help is to be degrading or rude or unkind or whatever, probably don't want to collaborate with them in the long run anyway.
Totally
so
agree.
It's a good kind of test for us, I think. And it's something that I try to work on real hard to, like, especially, like, you don't want to be rude to anybody, but you want to be especially welcoming if you notice this is their first commit to your project specifically, or any project generally.
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah, GitHub actually will list first-time contributor, and so you have an idea if that person, doesn't really have experience with it. But it's something that I think it comes from the Linux world, where there's Linus Torvalds, who really doesn't value. He values a specific set that, and I think that there's a lot more to value in the open source world. For me, whenever I see a pull request, I'm like, oh my God, thank God, that's something that I don't have to do. And I think that I'm echoing something that Jakob had mentioned as well, or maybe it was you, Michael. It's such a relief whenever I see a pull request, as opposed to being like, oh God. So it's something that's very welcomed within our project, and probably every PowerShell project that's out there. And like Jakob had mentioned, if you go into JavaScript or Linux or something, it might be a different story. And it might just be specific portions of those communities that have that response. But in general, I have not seen an unwelcoming SQL or PowerShell repo. So if you want to contribute there, we're totally welcoming.
Yeah, I didn't mean exactly like JavaScript is less welcoming than PowerShell. I meant if it's a bigger project, then there's maybe some process to go through. Like if you try to commit into the PowerShell language itself, there is probably something that has to do with the future plans about the language, some restrictions, some builds. It's a big project, so you have to go by some rules. And people probably don't have that much time to tell you exactly what you need to do. If you don't know the right people, you might find yourself very lost in the project. So it's not about the language.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Like a good example of that so day to day I work for Puppet, and a really good example of that is getting a contribution into core Puppet is much higher, I guess, like a barrier to entry than getting code into a Puppet module is. So like if you wanted to update a change inside of a module for how we interact with IIS or whatever, the bar for that is so much lower, because the impact is definitely a subset of users, right? It's only ever going to affect anybody who's using IIS. And the management of that thing just generally goes through a slightly less rigorous kind of process. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of tests for core Puppet, and they have very particular ways that they manage that code base. Whereas we are a little bit more free and agile to kind of like meet up with you and be like, hey, so you know, your commit message doesn't match the right format. Let's work on that real quick, talk you through it. And my team is always happy to like hop into like a one-on-one with somebody who's trying to contribute, because we want to encourage that behavior. And I think this is true in the PowerShell community too, right? And you'll find a lot of people are really amenable to this. It's like, hey, I don't understand how to, like, I want to make a fix to DBA tools. Here's the thing I noticed. I want to make the fix. I want to help. I don't know what I'm doing. Can somebody take 10 minutes to help me? Like, I fixed the code. Like, I made the change locally. I don't know how to use Git or whatever.
Totally.
I think you'll find so many people are open to that, especially if you approach it as, I want to help you, because we're really, really not here to turn away free help, right? Like, we're not drowning in resources generally.
It's true. That's a really great point about the differences between the two as well. And maybe that's another reason why, you know, people, if you're working on, if you're taking your scripts and turning them into modules, and then you want to work on your, you know, if you're a SME and you want to become the maintainer of the module like that, there is a lot of flexibility that I see in DBA tools that just, I don't think would be possible if you worked within the strict framework. And I understand why Microsoft has a strict framework. They have different expectations and different SLAs and things like that. But I really love that point that you made, that it is harder to get into the core than it is to get into the outside. So the outer perimeter might be an easier place to contribute to.
Well, it looks like we're at time. I wanted to say thank you to everybody for tuning in today, and thank you so much to our wonderful speakers. You folks really do make the PowerShell community an awesome place to be. And I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that everybody who's talking today's careers have been accelerated because of that community.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So thank you. We're looking forward to doing more of this in 2019. Submit talks. We need them. We can only do this so long as people are willing to talk to each other. So
thank you so much for having us. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
For sure. Thanks.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Happy New Year. Bye-bye.